Welcome to this Justice, Peace and Integrity of Creation interview with Fr Michael Rodgers. My name is Dennis from North Wales. Fr Michael is a Kiltegan missionary priest who has lived in Glendalough for the past 30 years. Prior to that, he worked in Kenya for 20 years before spending time as leader of the Kiltegan missionaries. Michael sought to explore the experience of Celtic spirituality in the ancient monastic setting founded by St. Kevin. He has contributed in no small way towards keeping the flame of faith alive in Glendalough and helping many people to become more aware of the presence of God in creation and in their own lives. In this interview, Fr Michael outlines the spirituality that is at the heart of justice, peace and the integrity of creation. And we're really grateful to him for spending time with us. And we hope you enjoy this as a short introduction to Celtic spirituality. Fr Michael, how would you describe your spiritual journey?
I mean, I always say the journey was really, I came from a very open place. I lived in the country and lived in a farm. And I think we lived in the heart. We weren't an intellectual family. We didn't have many books, even though I had an uncle a bishop. But that didn't really influence me so much that they were religious, they were well up in religious life. I think what influenced me was the natural world and living in the natural world. And so I went into the seminary then, and the seminary was really very much around academics. I mean, that's the way I experienced it. A lot of theology was very heady, very book-centered, learning theology, learning about God rather than knowing God. And it was then this coming back here after spending 20 years in Kenya and Africa was a journey back into the heart again. So I say my journey started in the heart. It went into the head for a while. I wasn't really fitting in very well there. And I went back to the heart. Now, not everybody could do that, but I got away with it. You know, I've been here for 30 years and nobody tried to stop me. I belong to St. Patrick's Missionary Society. And to be fair to them, they wouldn't have approved of my coming here, but they didn't try to stop me either, or didn't tell me I was wrong. They gave me freedom to be here, and I think they're happy enough that I didn't do any harm and that I helped a few people a bit.
When did Celtic spirituality come into existence, would you say? Can you describe for us its origins, perhaps?
Yeah, well, first of all, it was practiced long ago, going back to here in this place to the 6th century. And so then it seemed, certainly in the course of the 19th century, maybe after the penal times here, the 18th century, the 19th century, the end of the 18th century, 19th century, the church became very strong as an institution, but it was expressed in a very fixed way and very regimented way, very one-track mind way. So people then, in the late 80s and 90s, people began to try and, the world was loosening out a bit and the world was becoming one small planet really that we all exist on. And this kind of spirituality began to appeal. People began to say, what is this Celtic spirituality? And the conclusion, I suppose, was that it was much closer to nature than when we were in the church in the last century. And it was very effective in understanding the light and the darkness. And then it was also very creative and very very, very heart-driven or expressed. St. Patrick's breastplate expresses it really well. It just starts off with, "I arise today with a mighty strength, the invocation of the Holy Trinity, through belief in the Trinus, through confession of the oneness of the Creator of creation." And then it goes on to say all about Christ, and then it's the powers of nature, light of sun, radiance of moon, all these natural powers, and God's strength to pilot me against then all the evil forces, against all the forces that are against me, the negative forces that come into my life. And then finally it finishes up with Christ as the understanding of Christ, which we didn't really get from the church. Christ be with me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right hand, Christ on my left hand. When I sit down, when I lie down, when I arise, Christ to shield me, Christ in the heart of everyone who thinks of me. This was the conclusion seems to be that this was the force, this was the power that really directs us and saves us and guides us and energizes us into the future. So this is cosmic, this is big, this is Christ. I mean, we were very much focused maybe on the Jesus spirituality, which is all about redemption, saving us. But that's not the whole story. We knew that I always knew there was something wrong. There was something missing. With all this emphasis on sin, too much emphasis on sin, and too much, but that came from the past as well, and too much emphasis on trying to punish yourself, for being a sinner. Whereas what God wants is that we be the best that we can be.
Where does spirituality come from in the Celtic tradition?
Spirituality comes from the earth. It comes from within ourselves. And then it becomes an institution, of course, and we need institutions to try and get things organised and try and present a framework within which people can develop and grow. But the spirituality comes from within, and it really, if it comes from within, is there a real conviction? If conviction, if it's just out of your head, and out of a book and out of something you were told by somebody else, it's not really a conviction. You're doing it out of duty, really. You're doing it out of some kind of obligation and doing what others expect you to do. It cannot be coming from the heart, as I call it, which is with conviction. I'm doing this because I really believe it. I think it's so important to have that. And so, the day and the night, the light and the darkness. This is the light time, but there's darkness. There's always light and darkness. There's always darkness and light. In our religious tradition, we would have demonized the darkness. We saw darkness as a bad thing, and all the doubts and fears and the wrong things we do were all done in the dark. But that was not really true. We learned a lot of things in the dark. We learned to suffer. We learned how to be strong. We learned how to have courage and to stand up and to really be complete in yourself.
Is Celtic spirituality simply a religious experience, or does it have a structure?
Yes, it was getting back to roots. I would call it maybe indigenous spirituality. You could be Celtic, it could be Native American, it could be Aboriginal, it could be the traditional religions of India. Trying to get back to where it all started, and it brought me into spirituality, maybe more than institutional religion. I think religion is there as a structure within which we can maybe nurture our spirituality, but the spirituality is there first, and then the religious structure, I think, is supposed to help it. And it can help it, and it maybe sometimes doesn't help it. It creates divisions as well. So I was trying to get back to the original, and back to, this was the best place I could find. It's, the way I found it anyway is, there's love for the earth. That would be number one, maybe presence on the earth, presence of God on the earth, presence of the mystery of God. And then that journey of life is mixed. It's both joy and sorrow. It's pain and suffering and great gladness. That's the journey. That leads to a kind of a mystical spirit. And the mystery then is in all religions. I think in India you have the sannyasi, and you have the hermits here. You have these mystics that can kind of live without any much support. They can live in a very simple way. But the mystical approach, I think, is a very good approach. It's less intellectual. It's more heartfelt. And I think that's common to all religions, but it certainly was there as part of the old Celtic faith that was here. For example, here in Glendalough, the story of Glendalough is from solitude to community. So in other words, the first part of it is solitude, trying to go into the desert and trying to be convinced from inside yourself that I'm doing this because I really believe it in the heart. And then it merges into community. I like that idea that everything that you do, the truly individuated person becomes a universal person. The truly individualistic person becomes just you're doing what you like yourself. But individuation is recognizing yourself for who you are. And so then you become an open spirit, you become a creative spirit. You lead, what they call it, the via creativa. That framework has been put on it now by Matthew Fox. It's the creation spirituality, the via positiva, positive way, the negative way, the creative way, and the transformative way. So it's through that journey that you reach transformation. And that's the journey of life that we're living. And I find that the Christian way is very down to earth. It's very related to that model, that Jesus came down to earth and lived among us, emphasizing that the earth is number one. The earth is where it starts. And then you have to go through the redemption road. You have to find your way, maybe when you're lost and you don't really know where you're going, but you find that God is with you in that journey of the redemption. And then the big journey is the resurrection journey. The creative way, being as creative as you possibly can. So that the incarnation way, the redemption way, and the resurrection way, that we are the three pillars of the Christian faith. I think they fit into this, into the positive way of life, the negative way of life, the creative way of life. So it's just the emphasis that is there. I think that there was too much emphasis on redemption, I think. That would be my opinion, and that sense of we had to atone to God for our badness and for our sins. I think Jesus didn't come just to atone for our sins. He came to save us. He came to help us, maybe to find the right road, to find the best possible road to live our lives. And that's what he did. That's what he tried to show the example. He started with the people who were struggling. He didn't have much time for the authorities. He didn't have much time for the institutions that were there, the religious Jewish institutions. He didn't go there very much. He went to the people on the road, and the people who were finding the road difficult. So, I mean, to me, it would be my Christian faith fits into this, and I'm glad to be in that faith. It makes great sense to me. And it opens the same road, I think, that I'm trying to follow in. Being just gifted and blessed to be alive, struggling at times then to find my way, making mistakes and losing the way, and then picking it up and accepting that I'm redeemed and saved and that I can be the full person that I want to be, that I can be the whole person that I want to be. So I think it's creativity and transformation are the big words that come, that maybe somewhere in the middle of your life you realise this is what it's about. It's about creativity. It's about changing the world.
Father Michael, can you speak to us about the concept of the cosmic Christ?
Yeah, well, for me, the Jesus experience was, if you like, the the God experience in human form, in human expression, which is always very limited. And so I think even the Jesus experience was quite limited, really. I mean, he said at the end, I have yet many things to teach you, but you cannot hear them now, but I will send the Spirit. And we are the ones who are in that Spirit time. So Jesus was limited, and the Jesus experience was a limited experience. Afterwards, when he died, people like Paul and John, they tried to write and to understand, tried to really understand what he was about. And they came to the conclusion that he was much more than just a man who came to save the Jews or to convert the Jews or to live in that part of the world. That he was for everyone. And he was for the whole world. So that the cosmic Christ, it's hard to explain it, but it's a spirit that is within everything. And that it's not just within one group of people or even all people. It's within animals as well. It's within life. It's within the trees that surround us. This spirit of the risen Christ. It's the risen Christ. It's the spirit that is bigger than the Jesus spirit, the human spirit, if you like. We can say that he was divine and he was human, but the emphasis is very much on the human, his human experience. So the spirit experience is different. I mean, when we think even we're getting old now, the human experience is coming to an end. What will the spirit experience? We think in terms of the human as well. We're all going to be sitting around like this at the table and having cups of tea up in heaven. But it's not going to be like that. It's the spirit world. And it's going to be, I don't know what it's going to be, but I do really believe in it. And we believe in our faith, and we have hope that it is there, because that's what Jesus said. But he didn't tell us exactly what it was. I mean, he gave us some examples, but they're just examples. But it's the spirit. For me, it's cosmic. And I think the fact that it is released, I thought for a long time that when Jesus prayed that they all may be one, that I thought that was all Catholics, we'd be all Catholics. But then I realised later that the Catholic Church began at a much later stage after Jesus, and then it was influenced by all sorts of influences, politics and the Roman Empire, and it maybe in some ways lost its way. But the spirit of the risen Christ is universal, it's for all, that nobody is excluded from it. So that in other words, even people of other religions and the major religions of the world, that they are included too.
Do you think Celtic spirituality is connected with other religions, or do you feel that it is a unique experience?
I think that's the way it is, that people have they've grown up with different expressions of their spirituality, of different structures within which they develop their spirituality, but they have particular insights from the particular parts of the world that they come from. And the secret now is, or I think the God plan is, to try and include all that, rather than saying this is the only way, rather to say there are many ways. I think that I can give you a handout actually, which is on creation spirituality. And it says that there are many wells of wisdom. And I think as long as you know that people are genuinely authentic in following that way, that fits in. But you don't have to convert to that. You don't have to take that on board. As long as you're open to it and tolerate it and are sympathetic towards it and hear the wisdom that is in it, and maybe find that there are parts in it then that you don't agree with. But that's natural too. You can agree with something, or you disagree. But I think it's all part of this great mix of humanity, a great mix of life. And I think that's very exciting. But it's a future thing, really. There'll be less and less, maybe smaller groups, and more and more. Well, maybe in smaller groups people will understand that there's a bigger identity, that we're actually all one. And we're entitled to follow our way to, as long as it's a genuine way to really seeking the divine spirit, or the spirit of life, the inner spirit, the spirit of God, what we call the spirit of God. The divine spirit at the heart of life.
You've been at this centre for 30 years, Father. What made you come here?
Yeah, well, why did I come here would be, I would say, I was searching for a more soulful experience of my faith. That I had become a little bit disillusioned with the institutional side of things. I was in Africa Kenya and Africa for 20 years. Then I was home for 6 years on the leadership team. And then when it came to going back, I was in my 50s, early 50s, and I really saw that wasn't the best thing for me to do. That I wouldn't be, I didn't really fit in completely in Africa. I found it difficult, I found the language difficult. I found it, I got on well with people, and I worked, I was pleased with my work, and my work was considered to be a big success. But there was something in me that was missing. And that's why I came here. And I didn't intend to stay here. I wanted to try and touch into my spirit again, into my foundations, into my roots, into my soul, and find it again, and then go with that. But then people began to turn up here, and things kind of developed. It's like a bit like a growing plant. The way it grows, it sends out new branches. And this place became available. It was an old hostel where young people used to stay. And so it became available, and I moved in here. And then people began to come, and they stayed here, so they were able to, they provided enough resources for me, enough funds to keep the place going. So I didn't really plan this. I mean, I sometimes say when people ask me what inspiration did you get that brought you here, I would say it was more desperation. I was in a desperate enough state. And then it became very inspiring for myself. It gave me a great spirit, and I think that's why I'm still alive. That I can still be as alive as I want to be. So the people came, and it's not like the church in Shakor, where you have a fixed group of people, you know parishioners and you know people. I mean, I wouldn't have that. I've people come and go. But I meet people afterwards, and they always say that it was a good experience for them here.